welcome back in, everybody, to the Stadium Seat Sports podcast here on a Friday morning. As always, my name's Coop, here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And what we're going to be doing here today is should be a familiar, sight for all of you guys that have tuned in here in the past. We're going to be previewing these upcoming college football games this weekend. So that's going to be week 4. And Kriv, before I throw it over to you to get us previewed on the first game, I'll just let our viewers and listeners know which games we're going to be previewing here. It's going to be Illinois and Nebraska on Friday night. Going to be a great game. Big matchup of the weekend, USC and Michigan, Utah, Oklahoma State, Tennessee and Oklahoma. And then we'll save this one as a little bit of surprise towards the end of the video, but we have an upset of the week game to watch out for. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to you, let you get us started on Illinois and Nebraska, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, so this Illinois-Nebraska game is super interesting because Illinois has kind of overperformed already this season. I mean, they're 3-0. Nebraska's 3-0. I don't know how many people saw that coming. Obviously, Dylan Raiola has been a stud so far, kind of transformed the culture for Nebraska. Honestly, though, Illinois, while they've had a very good start, I'm not too optimistic about them in this matchup. They just don't have a ton of talent. This is a classic Brett Bielema team, looking back at how his teams were at Wisconsin. Very physical, good defense. They're going to keep them in the game. I just don't think they have enough firepower to kind of hang in there through the duration of a whole game, especially because the game is in Lincoln. So with that being said, I think Nebraska is going to pull this out. It's going to be a tough Big Ten battle, kind of old school Big Ten, honestly. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a fun one to watch if you like physical teams playing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm picking Nebraska.
Yeah, no, and I think you hammered on a lot of good points, and we're in agreement on this game. Like Nebraska over the last several years when they had Scott Frost as their head coach, you would look at those Nebraska teams and be like, that might be the best 3-9 team in America, but they continuously shot themselves in the foot at the most inopportune times. That's something this Nebraska team is not doing. I think Matt Rule has this Nebraska team laser focused from week to week, which is really important when you're dealing with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old young men on the sports field, especially. And like you mentioned, Dylan Raiola, true freshman, but he's played very well for Nebraska so far, has made some mistakes as, any, athlete is going to, especially a true freshman starting in, their first ever collegiate games. But I think Nebraska has just too much talent for Illinois. Now, Illinois has had a decent success running the ball, and they did have that nice win over, I believe, then 19 Kansas. So, Illinois being 3-0 is a bit surprising, but Illinois is kind of one of those teams for me in the Big Ten that's similar to Purdue, that you should beat them if you're Nebraska or a team like Ohio State or Michigan or, et cetera, one of those top, teams and programs in the Big Ten. But facing them always seems to be some kind of big, potential trap game. If this were in Champaign at Illinois Stadium, I would feel a lot less confident about Nebraska. But the fact that they're hosting this game, I'm going to go Nebraska in this game. But a close, hard-fought, old-school Big Ten battle. I'm in agreement with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I guess we can go to the next game, and you could call this a new Big Ten battle, right. Because we have USC Big Ten debut against Michigan. I mean, this is what it's all about. When the conferences realigned and all those schools were added to the Big Ten, this is what we were looking forward to. We get to see USC Michigan, a matchup you would only see maybe in the Rose Bowl. So very excited about this, regardless of how Michigan has looked the last few weeks. I mean, this is two blue bloods going head to head in Ann Arbor. So for me on this game, though, I think Michigan took a gamble and a last ditch effort, so to speak, on starting Alex Orji this week. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why Moore announced it so early in the week. He could have kept that under wraps and just let it loose at the start of the game. When you're a struggling team like Michigan, I think it's everything you want to get an advantage for. That's one way to do it. So that was kind of interesting there. But honestly, I don't think Alex Orji is the answer. I think he gives them a little more dynamic run plays and can make things happen when they break down. Obviously, it'll be a little bit better than when he was being subbed in his run package and you knew he was going to run the ball. So him just having to threat the throw might kind of help transform things for them. Mullins has definitely taken over as the starting running back. I mean, Donovan Edwards, outside of a few big runs in his career, seems to not really be consistent enough at finding the holes and making the small plays. He's a home run hitter, but he's been a massive letdown so far, especially coming back this season. And with that said, I think Miller Moss is going to have a Quinn Ewers type day. And what I mean by that is he's going to be able to navigate the pocket, make things happen. That Michigan defense is still very good, but they're also on the field a lot because their offense can't stay on. Yep. So I think it's going to be very similar to the Texas game, maybe not as physical, but USC is very dynamic with Branch at receiver and the kick return game. And I just think that explosiveness overall for USC is going to be the difference because Michigan's not explosive and USC is. And in the game of attrition, that's going to be the USC pulling out the win here.
Yeah, no, and I think you hammered on a lot of great points. And, before I kind of jump into my analysis here of this game, I'm in full agreement with you on Jerome Moore announcing Alex Orji as the starting quarterback over Davis Warren this early on makes absolutely no sense to me. And I think Michigan fans would be scratching their head at that as well. I think starting Alex Orji can still play a benefit and a role for a positive for Michigan because there's not nearly as much game film or tape on Alex Orji as there is Davis Warren. And so even though announcing it early, USC still has less to go on for Alex Orji than Davis Warren. So that could be a positive in Michigan's favor. But if you announce it the day of the game or the night before, it gives Lincoln Riley and USC even less time to prepare for Alex Orji. I do think Michigan's run game will get going a little bit more in this game simply because of the threat to run that is Alex Orji at the quarterback position. I think that will open it up a little bit more because that has been something that has been lacking for Michigan, really outside of Mullings, as you mentioned with Donovan Edwards struggling so far this year. But ultimately, for me, this USC team has really impressed me. They opened the year against LSU in Vegas. I thought Miller Moss was phenomenal in that game because Nussmeier played very well in that game for LSU, and Miller Moss played just a little bit better than him. And we all know what Miller Moss did in the bowl game last year, throwing 6 touchdowns against Louisville. I think USC is always going to be great to potentially elite offensively when you have Lincoln Riley as your head coach. And the fact that they have Deontay Lynn in there and this defense is not only just playing better, but they're flying around and they are being physical is going to bode very well for them, not just in the Big Ten, but overall in college football in general. And so I think that they are going to be able to go in to Ann Arbor, get this victory. I don't know if it'll look, as on cruise control as that Texas game did for Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns. In Ann Arbor there in week 2. But I do think that USC wins this game, and I think that they're pretty comfortable in this game for the most part. And I think it helps that this game is in mid to end of September in Ann Arbor, because we all know in the Midwest, especially towards the end of the year into October and November, the weather can get really, really rough, cold, snowy, rainy, sleet, just gross overall, which is great football weather. But some of those USC guys may not be used to that. I know Washington and Oregon, the weather can also be kind of cruddy, so it's not like they're completely void of playing in that. But I do think that playing it in mid to end of September in Ann Arbor is also kind of a benefit and or at least not a hindrance to USC, that playing it in like mid to late October or into November could be. So I'm going to take USC in this game. So kind of interesting. We've had some disagreements over the weeks on our picks, but we're 2 for 2 on picking the same team here to start.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that kind of plays out on the next game here, and that's Utah heading to good old Stillwater to play Oklahoma State. And I'll let you kind of kick things off on this one.
Yeah, you know what? I This game is the hardest game of all the ones that I mentioned to our viewers and our listeners here that we're going to be talking about to pick for me, including the upset of the week game. Like, this one is such a difficult game to pick for me. And the line as we are talking here is Oklahoma State -2.5. And the game is in Stillwater, which obviously is an advantage to Oklahoma State. The biggest question mark for me and probably for you as well, and the line may have moved because we are uncertain on the starting status of Cam Rising. And Cam Rising really is what Utah football and Kyle Whittingham preach. And, he's been the starter there for so many years. I don't even know how many years it's been, to be honest with you. And maybe you know this and can touch on this when you give your analysis of this game. But his tenure and seniority and command of that offense is so incredibly important to them. And so if he's not starting, that is a potential concern. For me, though, even if Cam Rising does not start and or play in this game, I'm going to take Utah, and I'm going to tell you why. I think Kyle Whittingham runs a phenomenal program at Utah. And to me, defense travels, and Utah has a hard-nosed, hard-hitting defense year after year after year, and I expect that defense and that hard-nosed, team and mentality and kind of like tough guy, bravado that Kyle Whittingham teams always seem to embody is going to travel down into Stillwater and get the win regardless of if Cam Rising is starting and or playing. I think if Cam Rising does play, I think Utah kind of wins this one relatively big, in my opinion. But even if he doesn't, I think Utah will come out of Stillwater with a win, even with them currently, as we talk, being the underdogs in this game.
Yeah, and I think you made a lot of good points there, and I think it's very bold of you to pick Utah to go in there and win with or without Cam Rising. If you recall in the season preview episode we recorded, my sleeper team for a potential top 5 team was Utah.
Yep.
And a big part of that for me was, of course, Coach Whittingham, but also Cam Rising. And with Cam Rising potentially being out, I'm more inclined to go with Oklahoma State. I know Utah is a very solid team, and they have an identity, and Coach Whittingham has those guys ready to go against all odds anytime they're out on the field. So this is a tough, really, really, really tough one for me. I like Bowman at quarterback for Oklahoma State. I think he's a gamer as well, and he puts up some good numbers. Of course, Ollie Gordon. So. I mean, honestly, for me, if Cam Rising is able to suit up and play, I go Utah. Game time decision. If he's not going, I'm going to go Oklahoma State. But this is a coin flip to me. And I know the spread is flipping back and forth between each team right now, -2.5. OK State, as of this recording, I mean, it is as close to a coin flip as you can get, and honestly, I would not touch this game at all if you are inclined to do so. So, but yeah, I think it all comes down to Cam Rising. He is the coin flip in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. And me picking Utah was very difficult. I wanted to pick in this game, and you did as well. But I'm in full agreement. Like, it is such a coin flip, and it's like going to be a game time decision. It sounds like for Cam Rising that, like, if I were, if we were, betting on this game, I would steer clear of this game personally. Like that, this game, I can't get a good read on it. And it seems like it's the same for you. And next game we're going to jump into here, guys, is going to be Tennessee going into Norman to face Oklahoma. And for Oklahoma, this is going to be their first introduction into the SEC, facing a Tennessee team that looks extremely dangerous. And so I'll jump off with this one and then throw it over to you. This one to me is also somewhat hard to read. And I say that with saying that Tennessee looks extremely dangerous because they do, right? Like, they won their opening game 69-3, then they beat NC State 51-10, and then waxed Kent State 71-0, and probably could have hung 100 on them if they really wanted to there in week 3. But at the same time, NC State doesn't look nearly as good of an opponent as what maybe people had projected in the preseason, which is why those preseason polls are really hard to get accurate and get correct. And so while we know Nico is an unbelievable talent at quarterback, Josh Heupel runs an unbelievable offense, and Tennessee is absolutely loaded everywhere on the field, and their defense has been phenomenal this year. So I'm going Tennessee in this game. But at the same time, even though Oklahoma has not been nearly as impressive as many people maybe had thought or had hoped, I do think that Brent Venables and playing in Norman at Oklahoma's stadium is not something that is going to be easy, and it's not something that Heupel and Tennessee should take lightly, even though they have made light work of every single opponent that they face, because this is by far the best opponent they're going to have faced up until this point. And there is also the aspect of Josh Heupel played at Oklahoma, was, I think, a coaching assistant at Oklahoma, probably wanted an opportunity to get the Oklahoma head coaching job. And so I think that there's an element of like him really wanting to go in there and make a statement. So I think Tennessee's going to come out with a team like their hair on fire. But if they don't, if they come out and they kind of take Oklahoma lightly, I could absolutely see Oklahoma keeping it close and or winning this game. But with the things that I mentioned, I'm going to take Tennessee in this game, and I think Tennessee wins fairly comfortably.
Yeah, and I think Tennessee's going to win this game as well. And the big thing for me, I think Oklahoma is obviously a good team, and they're at home, so they have that going for them. I think Jackson Arnold is an absolute gamer. I mean, he's their leading rusher, and he's their leading passer. But with that being said, that's why I think Tennessee's going to win this game, because Jackson Arnold cannot do it all himself against top-level opponents. Whereas Tennessee, yeah, they have Nico, but they have Sampson at running back, who is an absolute stud. I mean, you could argue he's just as important as Nico on this team. He's such a good running back. And for me, Tennessee's defense also has shown great flashes. And I mean, they have just incredible pass rushing ability on the edge there. So it's just the overall team aspect that really kind of separates this for me. Even though going into Norman is going to be tough, it's an evening game, so that's never easy. But Tennessee is a complete team, where I feel like Oklahoma is kind of Jackson Arnold centric, at least on offense. I think Brett Venables will have a good defensive scheme for this game, and it will be competitive. I just think the overall talent and the overall build of Tennessee is just going to be too much for them to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you hit on a lot of great points there. I think we've got some good games this weekend that we're really, really excited to watch here. And I'm sure our viewers are the same. Everybody loves a good college football weekend here. So I think we're in for a treat with a lot of these games. And before we kind of wrap it up here and kind of get to the end of this episode, the upset game of the week that we put on here is going to be number 13 Kansas State taking on BYU on a Saturday night 10:30 game. So I'll kick it to you here, let you give your quick thoughts. I'll give mine, and then we'll kind of wrap things up.
So our upset pick of the week, as you said, Kansas State, number 13 against BYU. Two teams that are 3-0. Kansas State took care of business against Arizona very well, I might add. They are a good team. Avery Johnson obviously kind of brings them up another level there. But BYU has experience. They have solid players. Retzlaff at quarterback, Roberts at receiver. They just have solid guys across the board. Not necessarily game-breaking guys, but they're going to give you a run for your money if you make any mistakes. So for me, I think Kansas State obviously will have a great opportunity to go on the road and win this game. But BYU at night is not an easy place to go into, and weird things can happen there. So if BYU can start off hot and maybe get a little lead in the beginning and get Kansas State chasing them, I think that plays very well for them and get that stadium rocking, and I think they could pull out an upset.
Yeah. I mean, listen, this game is in Provo, Utah at LaVell Edwards Stadium. You talked about it. It is not an easy place to play at all. And I didn't mention this in the Utah-Oklahoma State game because it's in Stillwater at Oklahoma State Stadium. But like going into Utah to having to play like a Utah Kyle Whittingham team is never easy. Like that elevation change, it's something that has to be considered. And it's the same thing when you're taking on BYU in Provo, Utah. Like these are situations that could potentially, if not directly 100% impact the outcome of the game, is at least a factor that should be talked about. And on top of just the craziness that is going to be that student section in stadium at 10:30 p.m. on a Saturday night, I think that that's something that Kansas State could have some difficulty with. And we both are huge believers in Avery Johnson, but this is his first year starting at quarterback for Kansas State. And to go into this kind of environment and, just go in there and win with ease or look, picture perfect doing so, I think is not only not going to happen, but it's almost an impossible ask of him and this Kansas State team. Me personally, I'm still rocking with Kansas State in this game, but by a very slim margin. I think the spread right now, as we're talking about it, is Kansas State -7. I would take BYU +7 personally in this spread if I were betting on this game. I think Kansas State wins the game, but I do not think that it is going to be by any significant margin for them. I think Avery Johnson has continued to make strides. I thought he looked really good in his last game against Arizona. Still was making a few mistakes, but that's kind of to be expected. So I'm taking Kansas State in this game, but I expect BYU to keep it close, and I would not be surprised in the slightest if BYU were to pull the upset in this game, truthfully. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game between these two programs. So really excited to watch it. Yeah, hopefully I'll make it through the entire game, but it does start at 10:30 our time, so I guess we'll have to see. So we'll either watch a fantastic game all the way through or wake up to a potential surprise with BYU rather, excuse me, maybe pulling the upset.
Yeah, I mean anything can happen, and especially those late night games. So we'll see what happens there, and then to just wrap things up here, we're going to give you guys our picks of the week.
Yep.
So every week we've been giving picks, and I think so far we've done pretty well overall. So
Yeah.
for me this week, I'm going to go to a game we already touched on, and that is Tennessee -6.5. As I mentioned before, I think they are just going to simply overwhelm Oklahoma over time, and it being less than a touchdown. I think that's stealing money. So I'm going to be going all in on that.
Yeah, and mine's going to be USC -5. I touched on it in that preview of USC Michigan. I think Miller Moss is the real deal. I think Lincoln Riley always has great offenses, and I think D'Anton Lynn has gotten that defense flying around and playing physical. And I have to see it to believe it from this Michigan offense. And maybe that happens this weekend, but until that happens, I'm riding with USC -5 going into Ann Arbor and winning that game. I think USC is the real deal at this point in time. And I'm really excited to see how we do this week in terms of our picks. And guys, if you made it through this full episode, we really, really appreciate you. Any kind of likes, comments, subscriptions rather, really, really helps us out. We love doing this, every week, going over these preview games. And I'll just leave it. If anybody, makes it through the whole video, you guys with this question, let us know your thoughts. Are there any concerns for a Georgia program that went into Lexington and won 13-12? Because for me personally, I look at this Georgia team and I say they're so talented. I have unbelievable faith in Kirby Smart. I'm ready to write it off as just like a bad week for these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, young student athletes. But at the same time, they did lose one of their best tackles, I believe. I can't, his name's not coming to me at this point in time, but I think he's going to be out for like 6 weeks. And Georgia has a really tough schedule. We already mentioned that in our preview. So, let us know your thoughts on that. And Cribby, if you want to throw in, your thoughts quickly on that. I just wanted to throw that in there because I think that was a surprising outcome from the previous week that we didn't touch on because no one thought we needed to talk about that game.
Yeah, no, I think I'm really interested to see what everyone has to say if they're still listening here. And for me, I mean, we've seen Georgia do this in the past where they've kind of struggled early season, and maybe specifically against Kentucky. They've had some close games just randomly throughout the years, and Kentucky easily could have won that game if they weren't playing to lose. So yeah, let sound off in the comments. Let us know. Personally, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we appreciate you guys tuning in here, and we'll see you on the next episode.